Hey, power couples, and welcome to this week's episode.
Hi, power couple family.
We're going to be interviewing Jesus Sampedro.
Ooh.
And if you see the spelling, it's going to look like we're interviewing Jesus.
We got Jesus on the podcast.
We got Jesus on the podcast. Great leadership expert. And we're going to lead off with a very important question. I don't know if it's going to throw him off, but are you a better leader at work or at home?
Stop bossing me around. Tell me what to do.
Yeah, well, I guess I probably have done that before, but I try not to. But I know we have had couples, like some of our clients, where they do try to boss them around at home, but also boss them around at work. And say, what was one of the things they said? I think there's one of our, no, it was a friend of ours, not a client, but a friend of ours. So the wife was working with them, and they weren't coming to agreement. So he tells his wife, "I'm your boss. You just do it."
I'm sure that went over really well.
Yeah, so don't do that at home. But not just that, working with your spouse, but at home. I think sometimes there's a disconnect, right? We can be great leaders at work,
Correct.
But we're terrible at home. So Jesus is going to really help us through this, and he's a leadership expert. He has his own consulting company called Global Leadership Consulting, and he's also a assistant professor at He's assistant professor and program director for the Master of Arts in Leadership at Mid-American Christian University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he's on various boards. He's on other different ministries. And his wife is a award-winning Christian singer too. And they have two girls that live in Edmond, Oklahoma. And they had just recently moved from Columbia to Oklahoma. So they got a lot going on. But anyways, I think he should be able to lend some insight into being a leader at home and work. And we'll see how he answers. Is he better at home or work?
Yeah, I wonder which it is.
Yeah. So what do you think, honey?
I'm not sure.
All right. Well, not answer the question, but what do you think about the subject?
Oh, I like the subject, yeah.
Okay.
So, I thought you wanted me to guess what he's going to say.
No. So this should be an interesting topic to see, because we all can learn how to be better leaders in both places.
Right.
Because we're usually not great in at least one of them. So like me, right, honey?
Yes.
Am I a better leader at work or at home, honey?
Oh, you're great at both, honey.
She's laughing. So, she's trying to be nice for the sake of you. Okay. So anyways, so get ready, buckle up, and let's let Jesus in. Welcome to the Power Up Your Marriage and Business podcast. We're your hosts, Robert and Kaylee Fukui. I know we're supposed to say we created this podcast for you, but we really created this for us. Because one of the power struggles we witnessed growing up and now dealing with in the present is balancing the needs of the business with priorities of marriage. Does this sound familiar?
As children of entrepreneurs, we're often on the receiving end of that struggle. Parents worked so hard to provide that they did not have time for us. We realized it wasn't their fault. They did only what they knew. But not wanting to repeat the past, we've been intentional about building a business that we run as opposed to it running us.
Every day we fight to keep the priorities the priority: faith, family, and finance, or the business. Some think it's impossible, but we say it's possible. You just need to challenge the false belief that a successful business only comes at the sacrifice of your family. It doesn't have to happen that way, and we know we're not the only couple to think this way and achieve it.
If you listen to some of our past episodes and tune in for future ones, you will hear from some amazing marriage experts and entrepreneur couples that have been able to build a thriving marriage and prosperous business at the same time.
So that's why we created this podcast, to be in the front row and hear from others that have gone before us. And from time to time, we'll share what has worked for us as well. But we know there's more to learn and want to take you along for the ride with us. We may never get it perfect, but with intention, we can all build a thriving marriage and prosperous business. So thank you for listening. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's power up your marriage and business. Jesus, well, welcome back. Thanks for joining us on the show once again.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you.
Yes, it's my privilege, Robert and Kaylee.
Yeah, it feels like we've interviewed you 3 times now. We've had some, just so you know, listeners, we've had some couple glitches here. Technology has not been our friend today, but third time's a charm. So Jesus, I know this is going to be an incredible interview. So I want to get right to it with a tough question. Because you're a leadership expert, you've got books, you teach it in the university, you've helped other leaders be better leaders. Are you a better leader at home or at work?
Well, that's a good question. Thanks for asking it in the first time. Based on the fact that I know that my wife could potentially see this afterwards, so I will have to say that I think I am better at work than at home, and it doesn't mean that I'm too bad at home, but it's just that I certainly have opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and thanks for being honest, because I'm probably the same way if I'm honest, right, honey?
Yes.
She'll let me know. And we noticed that even with the business owners that we help, and we just hear this is pretty common, right? You're great leaders at work and your business, but for some reason there's a disconnect in how we lead well at home. And so why do you feel that's the case? I mean, you think we should be good at both, right?
Yes, certainly we should be good at both. Not sure if the way I see it would be on the side of a disconnect. Is more on like, and let me go to my side. Let's say I've learned, I've led, I've been there. I want to have everything under control. That's part of our role, right? To make sure that things get done on time. People know what they're supposed to be doing, and we collaborate. But then when I get home, it is not. I mean, things don't necessarily work perfectly the way I wanted them to be. Especially when you have, two girls. One is 11, another is 8. They're growing, preteen, one of them. And then with my wife, we moved 3 years ago from another country to this one. Then the pandemic hit. Then we were in the midst of, getting settled and new things and then new stages in life and new stages in marriage. And, so I think I've been trained for leadership in more on the corporate side, on the organizational side. And even though I feel prepared for family, but it's an ongoing target. It's a moving target. By the time you think you have everything figured out, a new thing comes up. So that basically brings us to a point, or has brought me to a space of, hey, Lord, I need your wisdom here. What do I do here? Like, none of the books that I've read apply to this situation. So I don't know. It's always a position of humbleness, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I think because in business, there's a little bit more of a controlled setting versus in home, things can be very fluid, right? Kids are at school and in practice, and of course, moving. Your dynamics tend to change a little bit more fluidly than even at work, right? And so that can cause, I think the principles of leadership still apply, but it's just the fluidity, I think, catches us off guard and throws us off our game, so to speak.
Yes. And I also believe, Robert, that leading has a different meaning when we're at home, because it's like, I mean, my wife is not, and the girls are not getting paid for anything. It's we're part of the same team, and we're all contribute to the success of the family in general terms. And it's not that the way I feel that I lead, in the organizational setting is way different than the way, or it's a different role that I certainly have played at home. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so, being able to be a good leader at home is obviously important, because it does have an effect on how you lead at work, right? So talk to us a little bit about that, about having a healthy marriage and how it helps you be a better leader, even at the university or in your job or business.
Yes. Well, I always like to ask the questions like, who can be a good leader in their business or in their profession if they have strong conflict or constant conflict at home? I mean, it's from a mental perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a spiritual perspective, it's really hard. Almost nobody can actually have a clear mind to perform at work if they're not having a good moment at home. So I want to point back to a research that really impacted me some time ago, from a book that was published maybe 25, 30 years ago. But it was a research done worldwide with global CEOs of top companies around the world, made by Benis and Nanus. And they basically, went out and interviewed 60 guys and spent a time or two or a day or two with them, trying to get what were the key things that were in common among all of them, so that all of us can learn from that and all of us can basically move in a good direction for integral success. So, but among the many things that they researched and then analyzed the data, there were only two things that were like in common among the majority of them. One of them was that those executives had been in the same company for 22.5 years average, which implies that normally, if you want to be successful, there's an important role that plays sustainability or being in the same place, engagement, and everything. But the other thing, which is the one that I wanted to highlight here, has to do with all of them, or the majority of them, had in common that they firmly believe in the entity of marriage as a very important part of what they do as leaders. So for me, it basically brings about the equation of long-term sustainability from a leadership, from an organizational perspective, will get you to a place, but it goes together with the fact that if you don't believe or strongly believe in marriage as a core foundation for your leadership, that's not going to get you that far. And so that's proven by these top CEOs around the world. And so it makes me remember of a quote by Joyce Mayer some time ago. She said, emotional stability unleashes ability. So you're not capable of performing well if your emotional reality is not in a good position. So
that's good.
I strongly think that that's one of the biggest things that we can think in terms of, like, if we want to be successful in business, we better be taking care of what's happening at home, because there's a close connection between those two things. So.
That's good. Can you repeat the research that you were quoting with the top CEOs?
Yes, that's in a book called On Becoming a Leader by Benis and Nanus. And I believe it was published somewhere in the 90s, late 90s or mid 90s, somewhere around. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense to me because comes to mind an elite player that was the best of the best. His family life fell apart and he was never able to regain. It was really sad. That elite, he's still very good, but that same high status that he was before. And it just, it's kind of devastating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we've seen quite a few of that. I mean, sometimes high profile, right, in the news, where a high profile leader and they have some kind of infidelity or some breakdown in the marriage, and they're never able to regain
Right.
that status, right?
The level of performance.
Yeah.
And one of the things in my case, I read it once, I don't remember where, but then I reflected on myself, like, what is our home for us? What's family for us? For people that is out there every day, leading organizations or dealing with troubles, and we live in a very complex world and everything. But when you're heading back home, where are you heading to? What does it really mean to you? Because there are homes where people want to flee from.
Yeah.
But there are homes that people want to go to right after all the craziness of the daily life. And that's where you get charged, just like cell phones, from an emotional, from a spiritual, from you belong there. You want to have a great time with your wife, talking, sharing, growing, and also experiencing the joy of even taking a cup of coffee, a cup of tea together, and praying together, and speaking out loud all the things that you're processing, the challenges, and having someone that will be there with you together in both of the challenges. I mean, she has her challenges, I have my challenges, and when we get there, we belong there. This is our space for comfort. So that doesn't have any comparison with any other thing in the world.
Yeah. So. Yeah. You hit on something else. There's some some people, some business leaders, they kind of want to flee from home, and that's probably why they spend a lot of time at work, right? And so this could be a chicken or the egg question. So we might have
Yes.
you might not have an answer for this, but is it because things just weren't well at home, so then they spend more time in business because they're trying to flee, or was it because they spent so much time in business and all that it affected their relationship at home, and then because home life wasn't good, then they spend more time in business? I mean, it's just like the cycle, right? So I don't
Yes.
know what started first, because I hear stuff like, oh, things are good at home, so that's why I get away. So it's like, well, what caused that, I guess, is the question. Things
Yeah.
not be good at home.
Well, so some people might even think, well, things are good at home. That's why I don't want to get there. So because I'll mess them up. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a cycle, and it could have been started by many things, many reasons. Let me give you an example. Some time ago, in a major crash from a big oil company, a lot of people that I knew, they were fired, and they had to go back home, and they had been working like Saturdays and even Sundays sometimes for probably 20, 25 years. They were top executives. And when one day they found themselves going back home suddenly, and they said, like, I don't really, I talked to some of them, and they say, like, I don't really know how to have a normal day at home. I never learned. I never learned how to just be calm in my house. Just how to have a long conversation. So actually, a lot of troubles began to happen in their marriage because they were like, "Hey, you were never here." One guy told me, one day I thought about, well, why do we have this thing put here in the house? Maybe there's a better place where we can put this. And then his wife said, like, "Hey, sweetie, it's been there for 20 years. Like, why do you want to eat overnight?" Like, well, I just nodded. Well, maybe you're spending more time here now. You're seeing things that you weren't seeing. So, to go back to your question, I think there's so many reasons people might have had to have a tough start in their lives. They had to work really tough in the early stage of marriages, for example, and then they didn't learn how to spend time at home, because that's something that you got to learn how to do as well. And it could be that, yes, emotional and situations at home might not be as good as you wanted to, and so you try to avoid that. And it could have been that you were doing well, but at some point something happened, and then from that point and on, things began to change. And so, one of the two didn't want to get home the way they used to, and so anyway, it's but I think it goes back to the idea of creating the right space that may have all the elements that we know we need when we want to get to a place of comfort, which is like there has to be a lot of forgiveness. Everybody's gonna make mistakes, and we got to get back on track together. And stages of life, situations in life, work changes. Sometimes for all of us have like a busy season where we need to know how to unplug from home more than the average, but then we need to learn how to get back into a routine and recognize those seasons, because some people just get stuck in the busyness and they never come back to a regular so there can be so many reasons why these things happen, but maybe those are a few, right? So.
Yeah, those are good. And I think something you hit on too is not knowing how to be home, right? When you talked about those executives that got fired and all that, and now they're at home and they don't know what to do, and that created disruption and that created conflict because they didn't know how to be at home. And I think it's so important, as you say, even when you're in business and when you're at work, knowing how to be at home. Because I think what happens with, at least I know with some of our clients, right, is even when you're at home, you're still not even mentally there because you're thinking about work and all the other things. Phyllis right on the phone, right? Exactly. Texting and all that stuff. So I think it's so important just to know how to be at home, because even like there's going to be a point that maybe you're not working as much, right? Retirement, if you're not, at least you're scaling back how much time you're working. So you're going to be spending more time at home and all that. So, and that's where I see a lot of disruption happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and if I could say, and on the side of entrepreneurs, people that don't necessarily have to be in an office from 9 to 5, they just keep on working, and it's just one of the biggest challenges because you suddenly get an email at 9 p.m. from a potential client, and what do? You break down all your family dynamics based on the excitement and based on the urgent need that you might have because you're in an early stage of the business. Let's put it that way. So I think one of the key things here has to do with what are the rules or the limits that we set up inside our house for us to make sure that we keep it as our safe haven or safe spot. And I honestly think that, for example, think simple things as like, what do we do with cell phones? How do we make sure that we're not at home, but without necessarily being together and plugged as a family, for example, as a couple? That's big when you have kids. Well, even if you don't have kids with your wife, I mean, it could be that not only for mental health reasons, it's healthy to unplug a couple of hours before you go to bed. But do we really do that? Do we really have a time where we both say, hey, I'm going to unplug here. I'm just going to focus on you. And I'm going to focus on our relationship. And I'm not saying about focusing on talking about the daily things. It's like, this happened to my car. Tomorrow I have to pay this thing. What are we going to do next week? No, talking about us and how do we feel about life? So do we actually set up goals around that or expectations in our marriage, in our daily connections or weekly connections around that? Well, that's what I mean by setting up guidelines, rules, and even values, and how we administer and limit the things that we do within the space that we have. So.
Yeah, that's good. I think you're talking about boundaries and connection, right? Those are the two words that I'm hearing. You got to establish boundaries between, your work life and your home life. And then when you're home is how do you connect in an authentic way? Because a lot of times we hear leaders say they don't have time to connect, to spend time with their spouse and their kids and all that stuff. And yet there's a lot of research that shows that it's not about how much time you spend with them. It's the quality of time. When you're talking about connection, it doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of time, but it's undistracted time is the key thing, right? Taking the kids to school and to games and practice and all that, or doing errands, even though you're with them, is not connection time. As you kind of talked about that, right? It's not about that. Not talking about the daily life, not about what happened. You took the car for tune up and got to pay some bills, and that's not connection time, right? So what is connection time? And there's psychological research that shows that 5 minutes a day of connection time with your kids is actually good. It's better than spending 3 hours taking them to ball games and all that stuff. But it's intentional time, right?
Yes.
Looking at them face to face, not thinking about work and not looking at your phone as you're talking to them.
Yes, that's right.
They have your full attention. You're not doing anything else.
Yeah, that's no wonder nowadays we see a lot of emphasis on the word and of presence in the workplace, and at the same time in your family life. But am I actually and truly being present when I'm there? Because I might be there, but I'm somewhere else in my mind and in my expectations. And I think, Robert and Kaylee, I think we need to be more intentional in terms of what do I want to do with the time that I spend. And you said something really important. There's a lot of people that say that, I spend a lot of time at home. Yeah, but how much of that time you actually have quality of time? And I think there's another factor, the frequency of and not only how you use the time, but how frequent you use it. Things like, and one of the hardest things for me to keep up with, honestly, has to do with a weekly date with my wife, like making sure that nothing really gets in the way of it. That has been one of the biggest struggles, because there's always something.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something that can take that place, and the more and it has to be a mutual commitment, making sure that this is a special space. And even when we get to that special date, we have a tendency to go down to business.
Yep.
And then it was like, how do we unplug from that mentality and make sure that we connect deeper, and we create what we will need for the next week to be able to thrive and to emotionally, to be emotionally resilient when we go out. So it's so important that we make sure that we're architects of the way we build our relational capital in our family, so we can go out and do what we're supposed to be doing out there.
Yeah, no, we can relate, right? That's one of the toughest challenges, especially because we work together. So it becomes natural to start talking about work. And so, once you hit the dinner table, it's supposed to be no more work time, no more work conversations till the end of the evening, right? Once you hit dinner, it's like, okay, no. And then,
Exactly.
so we have to hold each other accountable, right? We give each other the look, and they're like, are we supposed to be talking about this? And then if all else fails, we have what's called the 82 conversation starters.
Yeah,
for there's a deck of cards. They're conversation starters. So sometimes you get stuck, right? What do we talk about if it's not work? So we have to pull out these cards and go, okay, that's kind of breaks the ice to kind of transition to now work. So sometimes you got to figure out those things, right? How do we make sure, like, when we get caught stuck in that talking about business, like how do we switch gears here? So yeah, no, we can relate.
Yes,
but,
totally.
But totally agree that you just gotta stop. You gotta disconnect from work and really connect with each other.
Well, because people say they're so busy, but at the same time, we waste so much time.
Yes.
That I think a lot of us, I know myself, I could find time if I stop wasting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's one important thing here that we normally have to have emotional capital already built for when difficult times come. So it's not that you're gonna, in the midst of a challenge, you're gonna begin building emotional capital in your family, in your marriage. And so the reasoning, that's one of the things that I talk to my wife, like the reason why we set up boundaries, the reason why we are intentional on a daily basis to try to see each other's faces, as you were saying, being present and not only doing transactions, is that we need to build capital, emotional capital. So because we know, sometimes some tough times are going to come, or could come, or might come, might not be as bad, or might be challenging, or at work, or with something. And so we know that if we are, found off guard from that construction of capital, then it's not going to be as easy for us to face that together. And it reminded me there's a wonderful life story from a guy called Mark Whitaker. I don't know if you've heard about him, a great friend. And he was part of one of the biggest scandals in corporate America 20 years ago. He even ended up going to jail, but he has a powerful story on how, based on what they had as a marriage, and they were able to survive the fact that he was sent to jail and spend there, I don't know, 10 years or something. And his wife would go there and on a weekly basis connect, and then they survived as a couple, and then he's now back into life. And he always says, like, it was all her, and then she was like, well, no, we're together in this. So but I'm wondering if before all of this happened, if they hadn't had like a close and strong connection, what would it, would it have been different? Yes, of course, that's what I think. And so there's a lot of need for us to build so that as we go through tough times, we can, have praise, forgiveness, and our perseverant love, and
Mm,
being there and making sure that we're together as a family, more resilient. But that doesn't happen by chance. I mean, you got to
yeah.
build it daily. That's one of the main motivations to spend these times together and be intentional.
Yeah, no, that's good. Emotional capital. That's
Yes.
huge. I think, you're just thinking, oh yeah, you've got the savings account, right? You got to build that emotional capital in, because inevitably there's going to be periods where you got to withdraw that emotional
Hmm.
capital to get you through those tough periods, right? And then, but if you go through life always pulling on that because you're not at home, you're too busy working, and you're not connecting and all that, you're just continually withdrawing emotional capital, because if you're not connecting, then you have to get you got to get that emotional capital from somewhere. So you're withdrawing from something else. And so,
Or outside the relationship.
yeah, or unfortunately, yeah, sometimes outside the relationship. So that's huge. And that's a huge story.
Yeah.
What you talk about with Mark. So no, this is really good, Jesus. And so I think, practically speaking, what do you feel are some common obstacles in leaders in their inability to lead well? I think not just at home too, but even in work, because they're not always good leaders at work either. So what do you think of some of the common obstacles?
Well, most of the obstacles that I have found has to do with the lack of self-confidence in things, and it points back to uh, my latest book published last year. It's in Spanish though at the moment, but hoping to have
Okay.
it in English very soon. It's related to the inner reality of leaders. So before I go out and interact with other people, how aware am I of all the resources, capacities, and experiences and gifts? Uh, how many of that am I aware of? Uh, I mean, I've been mentoring and coaching a lot of younger leaders, and it all comes to simple things like, do I feel capable of doing things? Will I have the support from those who I would love to have the support? Will I be able to sustain this if things don't work the way I expected them to go? And I mean, those insecurities, I would say, are the ones that are the biggest obstacles. Sometimes things
Mm,
outside aren't as bad as some of us might have them inside of us.
mm,
So being able to clarify values, to learn how to handle emotional realities, and know what, kind of like do an inventory of what I have, and be able to feel confident from there and move on. I think so. Going back to your question, I think the obstacles are normally more internal than
mm,
what we'll end up finding
yeah.
externally. That's one thing, and the other thing has to do with, well, I can connect this with what we've been talking about, the importance of marriage. Like, can you think of an entrepreneur wanting to go out and do something without the agreement and the support of his wife, or
Mhm,
if it's a lady, from her husband?
mhm,
And I want to give you also another perspective here. When I was about to get married 13 years ago with my wife, I haven't mentioned this, I think, but my wife is a singer, and she's a
I
very
saw
professional
that in your
one.
bio. Yeah. I was like, interesting.
She's a really professional one, and so when we were gonna get married, I wasn't sure how were we gonna handle if we had kids. Was she gonna work, or she was gonna do something with music? And I remember clearly listening from God saying, like, well, you better make sure that you support her in everything she does with music, because I mean, you're gonna be accountable to that for that to me. And so, going back to your question, I think most of the obstacles have to do with the way uh, we envision life together, and the faith that we can both join that I'm gonna be a support for her. She's gonna be a support for me, and whatever we go out and try to do is based on agreement, is based on confidence, and we both cheer each other. Go out like I want you to be successful, and so uh, obstacles come down when this kind of support that comes from basically from the house, from the home, makes us go out and break any big rock that we might find in the path. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Just like the saying is, behind every great man is a stronger woman. Right. And if it's the woman that's the leader, and it's the same, just reverse. But yeah, there's always that support system is huge, because I think when you feel supported with, especially with the person you love the most and trust the most, then you feel like you can do anything.
And then you're not resentful, because if you would have said, "Oh, we're getting married, you can no longer sing anymore," oh my gosh, like I would have been like, "You're telling me what to do?"
Yeah.
And then like the rest of my life, I would have been like, "Hey, it's your fault I never did da 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 because you wouldn't let me,"
Yeah.
So, and then it kind of like builds a wedge between the two of you.
Yes, yes. And it's amazing how we underestimate in the leadership realm the need for support. I mean, in the Bible, I'm so excited to find everywhere that we're called, when we're doing anything related to leadership and even in life in general, we're called to make sure that we don't do things on our own. We need support. We can do things on our own, and we need to have, of course, the support at home. That's the first thing, but we also need to go out and look for wise people that may come and speak up into our lives, gives us wise counsel, give us wise advice, and prevent us from going the wrong path or taking stupid decisions. And so, but the majority of that wisdom is going to come from home. And that's one of the things that most people underestimate. I have seen a lot of people say, hey, most of the times I've asked my wife, or some woman, I've asked my husband on big decisions. And if we both agree, things go well. If we don't agree, but I go ahead and do it anyway, the majority of times, down the road, you're going to pay for that.
Exactly. Exactly. Even if the decision works out, right?
Yes.
That's a great point. I think a great way to end this interview, because, and we told our clients, or one of our clients, we just said, I'd rather you make a bad joint decision than the right disjointed decision. Because when you're united in your decision, whether it works or not, you're going to figure out how to work together.
You're stronger together.
You're not going to blame each other, right? Because you agreed to this, and you're just going to work through it, and it's going to succeed regardless, right? Even if you make it, if it goes wrong the first time, but you're going to eventually, it's going to succeed. But even if you make the right decision, but you're not in agreement, things can go bad.
You might have what you wanted, but did you really get what you wanted? Because it caused a lot of friction.
And of course, I've also learned myself. I've learned the hard way with that. Was that you're right? Is that when you're unified, things tend to go well. I mean, they just do, regardless. It just works out. So totally agree with that sentiment. So Jesus, this has been quite a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
I know technology was not working with us in the beginning, but
now it did.
It turned out great, and I think you lent some great wisdom. And so thank you for being on the show.
Oh, my privilege. And I just wanted to say that thanks for what you guys are doing. I really enjoyed this time. And if someone is hearing us and they just want to take a time off, I forgot to mention that maybe as a phrase that I got out from in the Bible, there's a book, Nehemiah chapter 4, and I learned so much from it. And I came up with a conclusion that there's nothing more appealing, more significant, or a stronger force, that anything more energizing that to have the support from those who are at home. And we got to do everything we can for that. So it makes our effort worth, because once we're together into things, that's when things happen. And I'm glad that you guys are nurturing so many leaders around the nation and the world through this, and happy to be here with you guys.
Oh, and so why don't you give a little regards to our folks in the Spanish-speaking countries, because we're in Mexico, we're in Central America, South America, Spain. There's listeners all over.
Yes,
so
that's true.
You can just gonna walk us out with a little something for our Spanish-speaking audience.
Yes, well, we know that normally Hispanics tend to be known as family-oriented, but we got to work on healthy family relationships, healthy connections, and nurture that balance, that interaction between the two things. And I'm so glad that everything that we do at home we're gonna get the fruit out. It's gonna impact our businesses, and so that's the same here for us, regardless of where we live. But I think there's a higher emphasis for us to just have fun with what we do, but with the way we lead and everything, but make sure that we treat well people at home, connect and make a stronger case for a marriage in our lives, and then things are going to be different. And then let's look for support every day, and then let's do let's improve our daily routines at home. And I'm sure that we're going to make a difference in the way our next generation is going to come up after they watch us do stuff and see that imperfect balance, but intentional ones.
Okay, now say it in Spanish.
En Spanish. Ok, vamos a decirlo en español. Sabemos que en las familias en Latinoamérica tienen demasiadas cosas, o nos conocemos por ser orientados a la familia, pero no por eso tenemos familias perfectas y que funcionen en armonía con el trabajo. Así que en la medida que nosotros nos volvemos más intencionales con crear núcleos de pareja y en nuestra casa más armónico, le prestamos más atención a lo que está pasando ahí, en esa misma medida nosotros vamos a sacar más impacto para nuestra vida, éxito profesional en la empresa. Si las cosas están bien en la casa, nos va a ir mejor en el negocio, pero además vamos a tener la oportunidad de que nos vean nuestros hijos y así podamos tener garantía de que lo que empezamos hoy, alguien va a poder llevarlo hacia el futuro, incluso con mejores capacidades.
All right. Thanks, Jesus.
Thank
That's
you so
great.
much.
So thank you so much. And for you listening, I know it's been impactful because you're still listening. So which means share this with another leader that should hear us. We can all do better. Right?
Yes.
So please share this, leave a review. And until next week, right? God bless. Thank you for listening to the Power Up Your Marriage and Business podcast. If you found this episode to be valuable, please leave a rating and share it with an entrepreneur couple you know.
Yes, and to remember to hit the subscribe button so that you'll get all of our latest episodes, and visit our website, Power Couples by Design, to access a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business, like our weekly videos and on-demand webinars. And don't forget to download our free 8-step guide that you can find on our homepage to help your marriage and business thrive.
We're here to help you build a thriving marriage and a prosperous business. God bless your marriage and business. See you next week.